Please join me in welcoming Peter Darbee.
Thank you very much, John, for that kind introduction, and I'm delighted to be here on this beautiful Friday afternoon. I'll try and keep my remarks brief so that I won't get you behind schedule in the least. I just want to say first that I'm delighted to be here. I see a number of customers as well as a number of friends that we've seen in the past, and so it's a privilege to be here in Silicon Valley. We believe that there's a tremendous opportunity for working collaboratively with Silicon Valley. Climate change is clearly a tremendous issue for our country, for our planet, for our company, and for us as individuals. And we feel that the solutions to climate change will come in part out of Silicon Valley and also PG&E potentially working with Silicon Valley. So we believe that technology will play an important part in terms of the resolution of this great challenge for our world. Today, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about how we have approached the issue of climate change, and then walk through an update on that and give you the latest view that we've discerned on the issue of climate change. Specifically, PG&E took an approach which was very different than almost any company in the United States that I've met with, and perhaps the world. And that is that back in 2005, when I became CEO, I posed the question, do we have a position on climate change? And the answer at that time was no. And so what we did was we gathered together a group of about 20 scientists over a period of time. We took the top officers of our company and put them in a room with these scientists over a number of sessions and said, ask the hard questions, look at the people on both sides of this issue, hear their arguments, and make a determination as to what you think the answer is on climate change. So in 2005, we came to a conclusion that was very different than many other corporate entities did at that time. We came out with the conclusion very early. Climate change is a real issue. It's significant, and therefore there is a need for companies and individuals to take action now to deal with this problem. At that time, that view was unique. And in fact, I can remember being in Washington when we first came out with that statement, and a number of people turned around and said, did I just hear that from a corporate CEO? One of the scientists that was really actively involved with us in that early investigation was Bob Corral, who had looked at this question for the very left-wing liberal organization called the Reagan administration. And in light of his look into it, interestingly, for the Reagan administration, he came out with a conclusion that the Earth is warming, mankind's responsible, and the need for action is now, and dedicated much of the rest of his life to dealing with this problem. I received an email from Bob just recently talking about the latest report coming out of the United Nations Environment Program, and what it concluded is that the outlook for climate change is twice as bad as it was before, and they could see increases in temperature unless reversed on the order of 6 degrees before the end of next century, or this century, with the result that sea levels could increase by as much as 6 feet, which would be truly daunting for the world, and certainly many different countries in the world. Now that leads to the question, so what is our role and what is Silicon Valley's role with respect to addressing this issue of climate change? And specifically, we think the role that America has is that of innovation. We are convinced as a company that the best innovators in the world come out of America. We can't explain why that is, but we have come to that conclusion. And we believe among the best innovation in America is right here in Silicon Valley. So we're delighted that we have the opportunity to have the close proximity to Silicon Valley, where we can interface with you, learn about the technologies you have, and then test them and look at them from our standpoint as a user of technology and ask ourselves how we can work together to reduce carbon emissions and fight this grand battle with respect to climate change. Interestingly, last week I had an opportunity to have breakfast with the columnist Tom Friedman, and he and I had the opportunity to share our views on what we're seeing, and we got on the topic of China. And I said, you know, the Chinese have indicated a tremendous interest over a period of time with respect to energy efficiency. And initially they came to PG&E in California and said, you are the leaders in energy efficiency. We want to hear from you about what you're doing and how you're doing it. So PG&E being you know, one of arguably maybe the best in energy efficiency, maybe Edison would challenge us in that regard and claim it's tied. The Chinese talked with us at great length about it and then invited our teams to go back to China and talk with them more about you know, what we've learned and what are the key insights on energy efficiency. What we discerned at that time was the motivation seemed to be, as much as anything, on China's part is a desire to be competitive. And what the folks we were dealing with indicated was China was so inefficient in the way it used energy, it would actually drive its economy into the ground unless it became more efficient with the use of energy. And so we've followed what has happened in China since then. And initially there was no interest in the topic of climate change, at least expressed formally. Over time there's been more interest shown, but what we've seen is China has taken a great interest in solar panels and is investing heavily in creating great manufacturing capability in that regard, is moving ahead with energy efficiency, is very interested in battery technology and batteries that could be used for electric cars, and then is moving into the electric car production mode. So my conclusion is, at least on the surface, this comes out of a desire to be competitive in the world and more competitive in the world in the future, although I see also a lot of Chinese leaders informally and then maybe more formally talking about climate change and the threats it poses for the country as well as for the world. In the discussion with Tom Friedman, as we talked, we realized we both, from different perspectives, had come to the same conclusion. And he said, you really need to read my article that will be in the New York Times last Sunday, where he talked about the greening of China and how China has shot off a gun, but nobody's heard it. At least many people haven't heard it. They haven't heard it the way America responded to Sputnik when the Russians shot that off in the beginning of the Cold War. The Americans at that time saw what the Russians had done, viewed it with concern, and then responded accordingly to the Cold War. What Tom Friedman had argued is that China has shot off a gun, a starting gun, and said, we see the need to address climate change, and we as China will be a leader in meeting that challenge and helping other countries meet that challenge. And that just really converged with the view I had. And I thought it interesting that we both sort of came to the same conclusion, possibly not exactly in the same time frame, but certainly we were talking about it at that breakfast. Since then, of course, he's written an article on that. He mentioned notably our withdrawal from the Chamber of Commerce because of our concern about the course they had taken and the fact that our course was very different than that and really inconsistent. One of the things we both talked about is that China is investing hundreds of billions of dollars to make the production and use of energy in California more efficient. In my mind, China has decided they don't want to be a survivor as a result of climate change. They want to be a thriver and look at it. And interestingly, that's the position that PG&E has taken. PG&E made the decision to take a position on climate change because it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do from a perspective of conscience, but it was also the right thing to do from the standpoint of our shareholders, because you could imagine a time 20 or 30 years down the road